And this pattern, to me, it kind of talks to me over time. You get better at these patterns. It kind of tells you when it's ready with experience over time, and the volume kind of confirms that. Most of the time, if you have to argue if is it a high tide flag or not, it might not be the best pattern. But in context, during this time period, you could draw a line across the top of these powerful stocks and buy it. So context is key. This is ready enough. I mean, it just doesn't want to move around a lot. You've got the volume dropped, the average true range. You don't need the average true range to know. I mean, just look at it, but it kind of helps illustrate the idea that it's getting really tight there. So let's get this going, but I'm going to call this expanded high tight flags. I know we have maybe a different title on the presentation, but I just kind of trade around high tight flags. It's more or less the most powerful pattern out there. I want to take that power. I want to capitalize on it. And it's, credit to William O'Neill, obviously the pattern. It's a pattern that moves, 90% in, well, let's get down to this, 90% or more in 8 weeks or less. And there's not a whole lot of information out there on it. As part of my trading journey, I would just constantly go closer and closer to the highest RS stocks and trading those. And what I ended up settling on is basically 90 RS plus stocks. And, high tight flags, I actually prefer these. Okay. So, and a little bit about my trading journey. Basically, I've done everything you could think of, looking through candlesticks, chart pattern. I've been a member of all the different services, Minervini service, Zanger service, definitely, more of the pivots and power plays from Minervini's, and the volume is very important. And Zanger's, real inspiration on the relative volume and the timing and trying to get that right when the, and this pattern, to me, it kind of talks to me over time. You get better at these patterns. And excuse me, I got a cold too, so we'll get through this. But yeah, I mean, it kind of tells you when it's ready with experience over time, and the volume kind of confirms that. The best patterns form, during a bull market, obviously the high tight flags, and you want the flagpole from the bottom to the top to be at least 90% 2 months or less. 100% or more is preferred. The more power, the better for me. You want high tight flag, it forms in 3 to 5 weeks. That's the standard one. And you're going to say, okay, well, these aren't all standard high tight flags. That's why I call it expanded. We're going to see kind of ways of getting around that. And I'll go as short as 7 days, which is, not really a textbook, but you'll see why. And then I'll go into even a rocket base, which is from a failed high tight flag, a new base, 6 to 10 weeks. And you want it decline in volume through the peak of the flagpole to the low of the flag, and so you can time it coming out. Here's a little example. Celsius, flagpole is number one. It's got to have that 90% rise or more, and the flag, it has to flag out 3 to 5 weeks to be a standard one. You want the volume to kind of decrease in the pivot here, or throughout the pattern rather. And I'll use the diagonals if they're meaningful. If there's several points, you want more than 2 points actually for it to be meaningful. Otherwise, you're just kind of putting it to where you want to buy it. You got to let it tell you when it's ready. And then obviously some kind of a pivot, number 4, the green line, and then you want number 5, the pivot volume you want to come out. So this is the traditional type of high tight flag. And the reason I put this one first, and I've done this one before quite often, because it has the CanSlim stuff, and TraderLion has a lot of great content on, O'Neill stuff. And, it has the N, which is for the new product or service. And this was a new energy drink, and new energy drinks can be absolutely huge, Monster Energy, Bang Energy, all that stuff. So this just started to form up, and not a lot of people knew about it. And it's not like I wouldn't have it on my radar, because my scans are going to pick this up, but I have to see something new. And we're going to get into one where I don't see something new. So there's all the reasons. I'm not just a pure trigger man. You do think through all the scenarios. You have to, otherwise you might be just buying something that's not going to go anywhere. So this obviously went up to $60 from here. So this one went. I did sell it right into that earnings pop, and that was kind of an area that made a new base for a long time. You could have got back in at several different points, but you had the pattern. You have the 161% in 8 weeks or less very tight. So you could just, you could buy the top of that probably, the tighter they are, the more you can just buy the top. But I'm waiting for that volume trigger. And if it gives me a pivot, it just tells me it's ready. So that's where I hit it and, sold into those spots up there. So CRSR, so you're going to say this is not a high tight flag because it's too short. This is only 7 days. There's not a whole lot of information, a whole lot of rules about the high tight flag other than just the basics, 3 to 5 weeks and, 90, 100% or more rise. So I'm just looking for an entry and a pivot and a real powerful name. So it has this, this huge power. And a rule of thumb for me for an IPO is I just cut the rules in half. So if I allow a 14-day high tight flag, which is a short one, I'll do 7 for an IPO if it sets. And the warning was the out. Everybody says, well, how do you know to get out? On this chart, it shows you the ATR is kind of doubled. That's kind of a spot. Big volume down, coming back in as a spot. So, selling into strength is usually what you want to do. So I didn't have too much left at that point, but then you're out. So, and I think something like this was like a 26R trade or something. It put like the tiniest stop and just got really lucky with this kind of moving out there. And that takes care of a lot of losers. And then you can size up and, try to be like Oliver and get the 1,000%, right? That was an amazing performance that he had there. So yeah, so there's other ones like DQ. So this is interesting because people want to know like where to measure it from and does it count if there's this supply in here? So, I'll measure off the low in this type of a base because the highs, comes this base. I'm trying to make some rules because at least these are my rules. You could say they're wrong or whatever, but when you have a base inside the pole, so this is the pole, the rise here. You don't want the base in this black square area because now you're just buying the end of a big base. So I want the pole to be like 45-degree angle with not really too much of a base inside. And there might've been a little, you could argue that's a sort of a little base inside there, which is maybe almost a strike against it. You want kind of a smooth rise. And most of the time, if you have to argue if is it a high tight flag or not, it might not be the best pattern, but in context, like I said, during this time period, you could draw a line across the top of these powerful stocks and buy it. So context is key. You're going to say, well, that doesn't work. And it might not work, last month, but maybe next month it works again. And then you're back in business. And there's plenty of swing trades to do in between. And I'll show some of those too. But so you want to measure from that low up to the top. And I'll take what I can get is with a little tiny pause even, right in context. And these were working, but there was a little sloppy. So I didn't think it would go too far and I was right. And it came back and I got out before it would have stopped me even there. And eventually it rolled over, but at the time these were all moving. So my red signal wasn't until February 12th. So, and Tiger is another one. And you'll say, well, which one was this? This was 20, what percent? Or 17. So that's in the tolerance of the 25%. But when you have DQ, let's see, what was the percentage here? Yeah, that was the same one. Okay, so we're going to Tiger now. So you say, oh, it's slightly over 25%, but I give it a little more room with a more powerful rise like this. And if in context it's working, I'll kind of allow it and look for that opportunity to get in there. As this just got more volatile, but the volume dropped out. They didn't want to sell the low if you see the volume there. So I just gave it a try only because it was the new high and it was 10 times volume coming out. And that's the relative volume. And I use FinViz for that. I use every tool from MarketSmith to stock charts to FinViz. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of screens here, and I don't have a 10, but I should from all these screens. And maybe that's not so good for you, right? So you got this thing coming out and bought it and just sold into that, and tried to ride it for that bigger move in case it turned into an E-hang or something like that. It went up 300%, but kind of rolled over, and that's the kind of sign it rolled over is the market signal got difficult, and you got a big drop there. But you see these big skyscraper bars. That's what you want to see coming into the pattern. And like I said, I'm playing around this power when I can. It's just my favorite thing to do. So Zim is a trade. During this time, there wasn't a lot of stuff working like this, but you have a new IPO. I call this a high tight flag, measuring from the low there. Make a lot of allowance obviously for IPO bases. So this high tight flag was rather tight. There is a diagonal there with 3 points. Very useful. And then also you can just draw a line across there, make a pivot. So I'm actually buying that pivot just to prove it came out. And this is maybe some of Oliver's wick play in there, right? I mean, to me, the wick play is fine at a pivot. I actually like that. And I'm glad that someone reads candlesticks. I love reading candlesticks because they tell you so much. So it's a good tool to add to your toolbox to trade, looking at the candlesticks and say, well, what does it mean? It opened on the low and then it closed on the high and all that. So, but basically sold into that because of the difficult market conditions, and, didn't take the rebuy, which was maybe on this bar in April, which might've been like the 10th or so. So, as this became a leader in the space, and they're all catching up now, and it's kind of funny because it set up a new high tight flag, and I just bought this on Friday, and it had almost, a real tight area again, undercut. It's an IPO, so I'm giving it, that allowance, trying to get in as low as I can with maybe stop below the previous day or better. So, as it's coming out over the previous day's high, it's always coming over the previous day's high, but if I'm going to buy it, I'm not going to buy it like in the bar. So, and you can see the average true range, the bars are actually getting more constructive through this pattern, and it might be extended. It might need a rest or something, but I'll show you this one here. So there's another one. A lot of these names in the group are just taking off. Yeah, Zim had a secondary, so maybe it takes a minute for that to digest. But these are all coming out, and this is one I actually tried, but it kind of confirmed my red signal, right? So I tried this one in April. It was a little short, and it just kind of rolled over and stopped me out. And even if I, tried it at a better buy point, maybe I would have sold some into strength, but that would have been probably a full stop too anyway. So it was just a difficult environment between there and the next signal. So that's when I'm going smaller, and stops happen on these two. It's not a magic pattern. I wish it was, but you have to earn your money. And I did this one recently. Is UAN is a ag play fertilizer, I believe. So the pattern kind of tells me when it's ready, right? I mean, this is ready enough. I mean, it just doesn't want to move around a lot. You've got the volume dropped, the average true range. You don't need the average true range to know. I mean, just look at it, but it kind of helps illustrate the idea that it's getting really tight there.